you a little bit later on to just make sure that it is recording. Okay, there we go. So I am recording the session. Can you all see my screen that gives my Ellie 365 fundamentals and the time? Is that a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
You can
Yes,
see my,
it.
thank you. Okay, you can see my screen. And I'm just going to ask from time to time when I jump across, because I do jump across quite a bit between a PowerPoint presentation and going to the Office 365 site. So if I do and I'm talking and you think I haven't shared the screen, please just say, Ellie, we can't see that particular screen. And then I'll just change it over and hopefully show you the screen. So just let me know if you can't see it. If you want to ask any questions as I'm going along, please don't hesitate to, if you want to raise a hand and you want to ask a question. Sometimes I don't always see the raised hand. So if you've raised your hand and I haven't seen it, or you want to ask a question and I haven't seen that you've asked the question, please just say, Ellie, please, we can't see the screen, or you haven't responded to my question. I don't have a limit on how many questions you're allowed to ask me per day. So, are there any questions before we start? Is there anything that you would like to know, or a particular question you want me to cover? So, any questions before we start? As I say, you're welcome to put it on the chat.
Good morning, Ellie.
Good morning.
How are you?
Hello, Eloise. I'm good, and yourself?
Well, thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So just quickly, this is your very first virtual session. Ellie, these are all the new students for Africa that have just joined us. They started consuming their content at the beginning of the week. So they are busy with their first section of content that they're consuming for MS100. Guys, like Ellie says, feel free to ask questions, stick your hands in the air, or type your questions in the comment box. Ellie will cover information that she deems relevant and knows that people struggle with, or cover any content that you feel that she needs to help you with. All right, so please feel free to use Ellie during this time while she's available and training you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ellie. Have a good day.
Thanks, Eloise.
Right,
okay.
bye.
Bye. Okay. So there we go. So that's what I'm saying. So any questions that you want to ask me before I get started? Sorry, I'm sitting in and I'm getting very cold today. So if I keep rubbing my hands, it's just to keep my hands a little bit warm. So I just wanted to know, any questions before we get started, or am I good to start? Okay. How is your experience? What have you learned this week with regards to the Office 365? Have you learned anything? Would you like? Otherwise, I'm going to give you concept that you might have had a problem with in this week. What is Office 365? What are the different models that we can choose from? When they talk private cloud, when they talk public cloud, and they talk hybrid, what are they talking about? That's why I'm saying anything in specific. Otherwise, you're going to get my take on what we're going to be covering. Okay. So if we don't have any questions, I'm just going to turn. Would you like my camera on or off? What would you like? Just a show of hands, who wants the camera on? Otherwise, I'm going to turn my camera off for a while, because the camera can sometimes be a little bit distracting. Camera on, camera off. A show of hands, camera on. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't bite. Okay, I'm going to turn. I'll turn my camera off. Okay, as I say, because sometimes it is a little bit distracting. So I'll just turn the camera off. But if you want the camera on, you're more than welcome to just to ask me to turn my camera back on again. So if we go and have a look, and we'll just, as I'm going to run through some of the slides. I'm not going to go through all of the slides. I'm just hopefully just going to cover what, as Eloise said, what's going to be important. So the first thing we're going to be looking at, again, is the concept of moving to the cloud. Now, often I get asked, why do we want to move to the cloud? What is the cloud? And I will give you some of the strangest questions I've had with regards to cloud computing services. I've had questions along the lines of, if I store my stuff in the cloud, if it rains, will my data fall out of the sky? I've had questions along the lines of, if there's a plane going through the cloud, will they be able to store my data? Will they be able to steal my data? So obviously there are very different ideas of what cloud computing is all about. And I'm just going to get my, I want to just get my notepad here so that I can just write on that. Remember, when we talk about cloud computing, we are saying to you that we're moving, let me just come along here. We want to be able to, instead of having our data on physical servers, which is what we traditionally had, and I'm just going to hop across. And as I said, hopefully you can see my 360, my smart notebook. So traditionally, we've come from an environment where we had a physical server room. Can you see my writing? Can you see my scribblings? Can you see my drawing that I'm currently doing? I just need to.
Yes, we
Yes,
can
you
see
can.
them.
Okay, you can see that. So we've come from an environment, thanks for that. So, okay, so we've come from an environment where we used to have physical servers, and you would have had a server room, and you would have had lots and lots and lots. You would have had to have, I'm not the world's greatest artist. You would have had people who were looking after those physical servers. And we had big server rooms where we would have all been storing that data. Then we moved across from physical servers. Then we started using software. And we said, because when we looked at those boxes, we saw that each of those boxes, for example, we would have had to have gone out and bought memory for those boxes. We would have had to have CPU for those boxes. And let's say on box A, I would have gone out and bought a box that had 64 gig of RAM. They would have had maybe 8 CPUs. My next box, so let me just move this out the way so it doesn't interfere. We would have had the next box that would have had 128 gig of RAM. Also would have had 8 CPUs. And my third box would have also had, let's say, 128 gig of RAM. And let's say we put 4 CPUs. And when people looked at it, and when everybody looked at it and examined their systems, they saw that the boxes were being underutilized. And for example, if they actually came along and looked at how much RAM we were using on box 1, they would have seen actual, and I'm just going to write here so we know that the red is the actual, we would have seen that we were actually only using a 12 gig of RAM, and we were actually only using maybe 4 CPUs on box 1. On box 2, we would have been using, again, maybe we were only using 64 gig of the 128, and we were using 4 of the CPUs. In other words, we were underutilizing the boxes. And my third box, again, maybe this time we were even worse. We were only using 32 gig of RAM, and we were using only 1 of the CPUs. So underutilization of resources led us to looking at a software alternative. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just giving you the history of why we've moved to the cloud. so that you understand where cloud fits into all of our infrastructure and why we've made that progression from being in a physical environment to where we are sitting now in this cloud-based world. Otherwise, you don't know where everything fits in and how it all fits together. So we went from it, and so companies said, well, we've paid for all of this. We've paid for a 64. We've paid for a box and it's cost us a lot of money. And we needed to have all of the staff that would be looking after that. So the next progression that we looked at was, and again, using software like Microsoft's Hyper-V. Again, I'm just going to, if you, please, would you mind just muting yourself unless you have a question to ask me, please? Thanks, everyone. So we would have gone and moved to using Hyper-V as a solution, as a software solution that would come along and say, now we can take all of these boxes. So instead of having 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe we would have had all of these other boxes. We would have come along and used a tool like Hyper-V, and we would have said, let's see where we can consolidate these servers. And then perhaps we would have taken, and on this box, we would have had, let's say we would have gone and put 256 gig of RAM, and then we would have gone and had perhaps 8 CPUs. And because we'd gone and looked at all of these boxes to see what the utilization of those boxes were, we would have said, you know what, let's take box 1 and let's install him. Let's move that box into Hyper-V. And then we would have taken the same thing with box 1. We would have done the same thing to box 2. So we started seeing a server consolidation using software virtualization that would help us go through this process of consolidating. Because now if I previously said I was actually only using 12 gig, I could now give that box, and maybe I wouldn't just give it 12 gig. Maybe I would come along and say, well, let's give you 16 gig of RAM. You were only using 12 gig, let's give you 16 gig. And box 2, I would have done the same thing. I would have said, well, you were only using 64 gig, so let's be generous and let's say perhaps I give you 80 gig of RAM. And so we went through and we saw this process of from a software consolidation of equipment. So we were making better use of the resources that we had to hand, but we still needed everybody to be looking after this, and it became an expensive exercise, because now I had to also make sure that I had some kind of redundancy, that I would have to have made sure that I duplicated that box, so that if something went wrong, there was still a failover, and that we could continue working. But we were still looking after that equipment ourselves. And then we moved on to, and then we said, then service providers like Microsoft and Azure have come along and said, you know what? Instead of you looking after all of that equipment yourself, instead of you having to go and provide for those services, why don't we provide you with a cloud-based service, and we will look after all of the equipment for you. We will make sure that we provide you with the resource. Yes, you will pay us money. So we've moved from I had to have my own physical equipment, I had to have my own software. We've now moved to let's have providers like Microsoft and Azure providing us with these resources. Where are these resources going to be stored? When we talk about the cloud, there are going to be data centers. Where are those data centers going to be scattered? Well, they're scattered around the world. If you're wanting to actually see, you can go and see that every country or a lot of countries, Microsoft and Azure have gone and provisioned data centers in those areas. So hopefully, as I said, I just wanted to, any questions on that before I move on to the where Office 365 and all of this fits in, and anything else that you want to ask? So does this give you a better picture of how things fit in and possibly where the cloud and why we've ended up in this cloud environment or cloud infrastructure that we are currently using? Any questions so far? Are we good?
We are good to go, ma'am.
We are good to go. Thank you for that. Okay, so again, so let's go and have a look and see. So now the likes of Microsoft and the Azure, they are coming along and say we can offer you different kinds of services. And the question now is, what are those services that they are going to be providing us? What are the services that we could be paying for? Again, as an organization, you will decide, do I want to just go and buy servers from Azure? Do I want to go and buy do I want to go and buy a database? In other words, I want to go and buy an SQL database. I want Microsoft to provide us with that. Do I want to go through, and this is where we're coming in, do I want Microsoft to provide us with? So again, the choices are going to be there for us to be able to say, what kind of resources do we want to buy from Microsoft? Because it can, and for a lot of companies, that now Microsoft, now Azure are going to be looking after those services, and they're going to be charging us money. Again, the question of now I can be working anywhere, and I can have access to the different services. So when we look at it and we say, again, this is what I was trying to get at. We've moved from a funding perspective, we've moved from having to provide those services ourselves, where we had to carry the costs of the server and of the storage and of the network, the backup, business continuity. What happens if that one box fell over? Well, I'd have to make sure that I provided a second box, because if that box, because we can't stop the business from carrying on working, we had to make sure that from a business continuity, from a disaster point of view, that business was able to continue. Because business, by the way, business doesn't want to know your problem. Business doesn't care if you come along and say, well, the hard disk crashed. Business is going to say, sir, why are you? Business is going to come along and say, you're making your problem my problem now. For what reason? Business doesn't care. You have to make sure that you're going to be able to, regardless of what happens, whether the hard disk crashes, whether the server crashes, whether, heaven forbid, whether your server room burns down. Business says we need to be able to continue working. So you had to carry, and this is what I was showing you earlier, we had to carry all of these. We had to budget for this. And as that typically you ended up over budgeting, you ended up overspending, you ended up buying a box way bigger than you needed. And when you looked at that box, you saw that you were underutilizing it. So again, when we look at what does cloud give us, cloud comes along and says, well, now you're paying. You pay for what you're using. We will charge you. Again, based on what your requirements are going to be, we will give you different packages, give you different options. So again, you will decide what is the software, what is the feature that you want. You will decide, again, as I say, based on your requirements. If you use more, you'll pay more. If you use less, you're going to pay less. So this again is just the different from a funding perspective. Why do we want to go to the cloud? Because and please, I'm never going to say that this option of on-premise that was you're never going to see on-premise again. No, we're just saying who can we help to help us provide those different services to our customers. Again, when we look at the choices of what kind of cloud computing models are there for us to choose from, again, we've got these options like, well, there we've got, and you've heard, we've got a public, we've got a private cloud, we've got a hybrid cloud. And when we look at the public cloud, again, as an organization, I'm saying I'm not going to have a server room. I'm not going to have anything. We're going to move to the cloud. So I'm not going to have any of that local hardware that I need to keep updated, that I need to make sure that I've got the service packs that I need to apply. The choice again, if we have a look here, is to say, do we want to go for a shared public cloud? And again, when we're talking at the public cloud, thank you very much. This is Azure. Azure is a public cloud provider where they allow everybody to be able to come in and to be able to use their resources. Now, if we have a look, we can see that they give us two options. Do you want to go a shared public cloud? Do we want to go a dedicated public cloud? And when we look at those two options, a shared public cloud comes along and says, well, here I have, and I'm just going to come along here. Shared public cloud says, there we go. This is Azure with their hardware that they are allowing us to lease. And again, we're not leasing every single, we're just leasing a portion. We're just paying, as I said earlier on, we're just paying for a portion of the service that they are providing, that we would like to pay for. So again, when we look at, and again, I'm just taking a box. And I'm just going to say, for example, whereas previously we would have had access to our own box, now we're going to say, and Microsoft come along and Azure come along and they say to us, and I want to just, let me just get, okay, I'm actually just going to hop across. I'm actually just going to hop across here to my other box. So here we go. This is Microsoft. This is Azure. This is one of their boxes. And they can come along and say, Ellie, you've subscribed, you've gone along and you've bought an Office 365 subscription, or you've got using the Azure portal, whatever it is. And here you go, this is what you are, this is your Office 365, or this is your machine that you've gone and bought. And this is Ellie over here. And I'm going to be paying for that. I'm going to be paying for that service. And then we have Aaron. Aaron comes along and says, Aaron says, I also want to buy and use your services, Azure. And he comes along and he also uses, but now he's because we want to be able, he also wants to be able to maximize his costs. He also comes along and he also pays. And there's his. And then we have, who have I got? Let's see who I got also here. And then we have Leonardo. Leonardo comes along and he also said, ladies and gentlemen, we are all sharing. Leonardo, I hope I've spelled your name. I hope I've spelled your name right there. We're all sharing the same box. Do we know about each other? No, we don't know about each other. We don't know that we are all sharing the same box. So that is a shared, we are sharing common resources. The service provider, in this case, Azure, says, here's a box and I'm providing you. But we don't know about each other. So each company, Ellie I only know about mine. Aaron only knows about his. Leonardo only knows about his. Yes, each one of us can have multiple tenants. We can create multiple, but we're still sitting in our own. We still think that we're sitting in our own little environment. Aaron doesn't know about Leonardo. Leonardo doesn't know about Ellie either. This is the example of a shared public cloud. Now people say to me, so what is the problem? Is there a problem with this shared public cloud? So does anybody have an issue or a potential issue with this shared public cloud? Anybody? Do you have any concerns? Do you think this is because for most of us, this is the option that we go for. So why then does Azure come along and say, I can go through and create and I can give you your own dedicated public cloud. Why give me a because it's going to be more expensive. Because now we are saying that physical infrastructure and the dedicated public cloud, dedicated public cloud is just only going to be Lebohang says a bandwidth. Nope, it's not a bandwidth issue that we're looking at there, Lebohang. Why else would we? What other concerns might you have? So it's not a bandwidth issue. Anybody else want to add? And you're quite right. So now when we start looking at security, so security could be, of course, security is going to be an issue. And the reason that we say that security is potentially an issue, because when we look at a shared public cloud, we all sitting on the same and sharing the same infrastructure. So potentially, you might say to me, but what happens? Can Leonardo not gain access to my stuff? Can Ellie not gain access to Leonardo's stuff? Who? Sorry, I'm just to see who was who's. I'm not sure. Can't see. Somebody's asking a question. Your raised hand. I can't see who it is, but just ask the question anyway.
Hi, ma'am. I was just going to add that a potential issue could be that in the future, Aaron might want to gain more space on the public cloud or to increase its capacity.
But that's fine. Azure says not a problem. Azure says if you want, I can provide you more resources. So that's not necessarily the issue. But let's see. Is it? But thank you for that contribution. Is it? And I do apologize. Is it Tolotlo? Am I saying your name? Am I saying your? As I say, apologies. Yes, you wanted to ask a question. Go ahead, ask or contribute. You wanted to say something there?
Hi, ma'am. No, I was just agreeing that you pronounced my name correctly.
Did I pronounce? Okay, but so why would I want to go dedicated? Because it's going to cost me more money. So why would I want to go that dedicated? So we've had one of the security being a concern to us. So it could be, so we've had security thrown into it. Remember, if 3, 4, 5 of us are all sharing the same box, what about the question of performance? So we want better security, we want better performance, because we don't ever want to be able to say, because one of the reasons that you might have is that from a governance point of view, so your corporate governance might say, you might have a regulatory concerns that might say you may store stuff in the cloud, but you're not allowed to share your data. Your data can't be on the same box as anybody else's box. So you could have those issues where you want to say, I want to be able to go and do my own, I want to have that box, I want to be able to do my own stuff. So again, you say, do I want to pay for that dedicated and have that as a service that Microsoft are going to and Azure are going to give to me, where it's my box and only my box, and I can do whatever? So again, now people say to me, but isn't that the same as having my on-premise equipment? And I can say, you can look at it like that. But instead of you having to provide and pay for everything, you're now getting the likes of Azure to do. So you can have the whole public cloud infrastructure, or you can also have, if you wanted to have, and you wanted to have your own system, you could also have Azure also provides us with dedicated hosts. Again, when you're asking, am I going to use the same, do I want to use the shared public cloud? Do I want to go for my own dedicated public cloud? Again, you will look at the pros and cons, and you will look at and ask from a security perspective, from a performance perspective, from a cost perspective as well. You will ask yourself these questions when you're deciding, am I wanting, what cloud model do I want to go for? And again, there's my private cloud. So I go for a dedicated public cloud. So that infrastructure is reserved solely for my use. A private cloud says, again, I'm creating that equivalent cloud environment. I'm creating it in my own data center. And again, this is where a lot of people say to me, but doesn't that private cloud also sound the same as the on-premise infrastructure? Again, it depends on how you look at it. And some people would say, yes, that could be. But the difference is that I remain responsible for all of the infrastructure. So for a lot of companies, they would say private cloud, very similar to having your own dedicated on-premise environment. Again, it gives me the flexibility. It gives me the security. I'm not sharing with anybody. Nobody else is responsible for anything. Again, when I'm starting to look at that private cloud, this is where you could be saying, well, isn't that what Hyper-V is giving me? From that, when I started early on and I said, from a software point of view, I could be using Hyper-V. I could be using, let's just stick with Hyper-V. We'll just stick with it. There are other providers out there, but again, I'm virtualizing that physical environment, and this is what I'm going to be ending up with. But again, I'm going to be responsible for all of that. And then we have our third option, which again says I want to be able to, I'm still going to have data. I still might have some stuff on premise. I might still have some stuff that is stored again, where I've got my, I've still got the Hyper-V. I'm still running that SQL database on that, in my on-premise and my Hyper-V that I'm responsible for. And I can also have a web server, and that web server or services, let's go for the web server, I can have that sitting up in the cloud. So I've got the best of both worlds. I've got, from a security perspective, I can come along and say, well, I want to store this because again, if you're looking at your security requirements, if you're looking at legislation that says this is what you can and can't have, again, we can come along and say, this needs to be stored. I need to be in charge of that. That we need to be keeping. That needs to be on premise. Because of potential security issues, because of legislation that might, regulatory requirements that might say you can't have this stored up in the cloud. It has to be under your control. But the web server that's accessing that data, that we can quite happily have sitting up in the cloud and accessing our resources. So obviously a combination of both of those. I'm using both online and I'm using on-premise, giving me my hybrid combination. That's why I said I get clients who say to me, does that mean to say that there's going to be the death of the on-premise? No. There's always going to be a need to have that, and it's always going to come back to the issues like security, issues like compliance and regulatory requirements that say. Because for some companies, they might very well say, you may not store your data off your premise. Companies like the insurance companies, police. I deal with clients that look after the police. They've got to be very careful about what kind of data they store up in the cloud. You can't just automatically say, well, we're going to move everything to the cloud. Think about the medical environment. They can't store everything up in the cloud. And again, just on the private cloud, you get governments, like for example, in US, China, they have their own private cloud where nobody else besides the US government departments can store their data. So again, as I said, different companies will have their requirements and they will say, this is what we want, and this is what we want to have, and this is what we want to give you access to. Any questions that you might have there? Or are we still good to go? Are we still okay? Any questions? We good? So now when we look at that and we take it just one step further, I'm not going to spend too much more time here on I'll spend a little bit more time on the types of cloud services. And again, you may or may not have heard people throw about the word infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. Yes, you have a question?
Yeah, someone asked the question on the chat box saying, is the private cloud meant for sensitive data?
Yes. Yes, that's exactly the data that you can't afford, that you want to make sure never ends up in the cloud. That's why I said you would look at those and you would have those concerns. Private clouds are for sensitive data. Yes, most definitely. As the example that I gave with my, if I go back to my database, the database has got sensitive information. We can't afford, as I say, we are not allowed, in terms of the industry we're in, we're not allowed to store any data at all up in the cloud. It all has to be stored, and we have to be responsible for that data. The data is not allowed to go up to the cloud. That's why you would have the private cloud option. As I said, because of security, because of the sensitive nature of the data that you are storing. As I said, think about the police services, the medical industry, the insurance company. I've got clients from the insurance company where they've said, this is the data we're allowed to store, and anything that's got any kind of client information, we're not allowed to store it in the cloud. It has to be stored on premise. So if we're talking on premise, immediately, as I say, we're looking at that. Let's go that Hyper-V solution again, where we're going to be using and storing that database. Because again, here's my Hyper-V box. And inside there, I've gone and installed, and I'm running a virtual machine. And inside that virtual machine, I'm running SQL. So yes, to answer everybody's question, private cloud is typically where we want to make sure that we are storing sensitive data that we want to be in control of, that we do not, and we may not be allowed to store up in the cloud. End of story. You stay on premise. That's it. Thank you for the question. Any other question that you want to ask before I delve down into my 3 infrastructure platform as a service? Okay. So again, I'm going to come across here. I'm going to go here to my box. And hopefully you can see my smart noteboard. Again, when we just look at those 3 options, infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service, I come along and I say to Azure, I want to buy a virtual machine, a VM. What kind of virtual machine do I want to buy? Well, Azure don't care. Azure come along and say, well, here you go. You want to buy a box? You say what you will pay for the amount of memory that you want. You will come along and say how many processors you want. You will come along and say this is the size of the hard disk that you would like on that machine. Microsoft say that's fine. We can provide you with all of those resources. We will be responsible for making sure that that physical machine, that virtual machine that you are paying for, that the memory is always there, that the CPU is there, that the disk is there, that the network card, that those network resources, that they're always there for you. After that, Azure don't care. Azure don't care what goes on inside that box. Azure don't care about the operating system that you decide to install. They don't care if you never do any security, if you never patch your box. They don't care what applications you install inside that box. because they're going to say that's the customer's responsibility. That's your responsibility. As Azure, we will be looking. So Azure will look after this. As I said, if you never back up that box, if you never come along and ever back up that VM, Microsoft are not going to come along and say, hey, they're never going to come along and say, you haven't backed up your box. They're not going to say that. They're not going to come along and say, if Maggie's still there, they're not going to come along and say, Maggie, you've not backed up your box. They're not going to come along and say to Manure, you haven't backed up. They're not going to do any of that because they're going to say that's your responsibility. So whether it's a VM that I want to go out and buy, whether that's a hard disk that I want to buy, infrastructure as a service. That's option one that you can go for. You have got complete control over that box. Let me just put this. You've got complete control. As I say, what you do with that box, how you use that box, it is your responsibility. Infrastructure as a service. Option two says we can go platform as a service. And I'm just going to hop across here just so that we can see. Because if I just go back here, and I'm just going to draw here, you can see this was what Azure were responsible for. They were not responsible for anything else. Platform as a service says I'm now as your provider, I'm now going to be responsible for a little bit more. I will give you a platform from which you can work. You don't have to worry as the client. Again, this is going to be your responsibility over here. By the way, this is known as a shared responsibility model. Because they will say to you, Azure will look after the operating system. Azure will make sure, for example, if you're wanting to run and develop web services, Azure gives you all of that. All you've got to come along is develop the application, is to put the data on there. So platform as a service examples there could be, as I say, developing of web services. Developing functions. I don't have to worry. I don't have to care about any of this underlying. I don't have to worry about any of that. I just come along and I develop my function. I develop the service. So again, another example of a platform as a service, as I said, is my custom web and mobile application that I decided to come along. And so I just have to worry about the development of that application. Don't have to worry about anything else. We can see as we're going along, so we have more and more responsibility falling to Azure. Again, this is me. This is the customer. This is the customer that. This was the customer over here. And our final type of cloud. Thank you very much. Software as a service. And of course, this is where our Office 365 comes in. Microsoft come along and say, well, we can provide you with your service. We can provide you with your Office 365. We can provide you with access to SharePoint. We can provide you with access to managing your workstations. Again, depending on which license you want to go out and buy. But the point is, I don't have to worry about any of that. I just have to worry about creating my users and giving them access to that service. And this is what I'm talking about over here. And hopefully, let me just come down here. Hopefully, let me just come along here to here's my Office 365. There I've got my Word. If I want to open up my Word, then my Word will launch. I can go and create that. If I want to go and open up my Outlook, I've got access to that. And I can go and see what emails I do or don't have. That is thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. There is my Office 365. If I wanted to go through and say, use my Teams, use SharePoint, use OneDrive, all of that's included. And so long as I pay my license, pay for that subscription, again, depending, do I want it as how many users do I want to buy for? Again, I can come across and I can have a look and see what did my subscription get? What did I pay? How many licenses did I get? So I can go and open up the admin portal and hopefully I can see, if I go and look and see what I've got, go and see what licenses I currently have and what I'm paying for. And we'll just wait. Oh, okay. So I bought again, there's my Enterprise Security E5. Oh, I've got 15 licenses, 15 licenses for Office 365. The E5 license, the Office 365 F3. There's a license for Windows 10. So you as a customer, you will decide, particularly when you're coming to your Office 365, again, you will decide what license are you wanting? What subscription do you want to have? Again, based on your requirements. Doesn't matter. I just want to make sure we are all using, if we all subscribe to Office 365, the question is, what functionality do we have? Will depend on whether I want to go for the E3 license, whether I want to go for the E5 license, whether I want to go for that. Again, if you're wanting to see what those licenses cover, hopefully I can just come along. Hopefully I can just come along here and say to you, if you're wanting to see the detail of what we're getting, let's see, license options. And I want to go through and compare the different plans that they will give us. And hopefully I get to see. We get to see. Again, what am I prepared to pay for each? Do I want to go for the family plan? Do I want to go for my own plan? Do I want to go? So we can see there are different plans. If I'm wanting to see, hopefully if I go and see the 365 business, let's see if they're going to show me. So it's not just a case of saying, well, I'm going to buy an Office 365, because we can see that there are different products available. You will decide based on your company requirements, which of those Office 365 licenses you want to go for. And that's my software as a service example. If you're wanting to go, Exchange Online. Exchange Online is also an offers a software as a service. So again, depending on your requirements, depending on issues like privacy, compliance, data protection, it's all of those things that will guide you on which of the cloud services you would be going for. I want to just, I think that was any questions that you have regarding where Office 365 and the fundamentals of Office 365. Any other question that you might have had if you didn't already have that to hand? Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to ask a question and Archibald? Let's see who. Let me see who's. Aaron. Joseph.
Hello.
Hello. Any questions, Aaron?
None so far.
None so far. You haven't lost sleep over anything that you like.
No,
Hey,
I haven't.
okay. So the next question is, what is Office 365? Well, I've sort of given you that. I've sort of headed you in the right direction. Yes, obviously we have Azure 365. And I just want to, I'm not going to go into too much detail because often people say to me, I've bought Office 365. I came along and I purchased Office 365. What do you mean? What do I need to know about? Why do I need to know about Azure? Because ladies and gentlemen, everything that you do, and if I come along here to my Office 365, even though you may only have purchased an Office 365 license, which a lot of companies go ahead and do, when you're going through and creating those users, those groups, all of that is supported. And if I come down here, I can show you all of that is supported by Azure Active Directory. Those users and groups that you're going through and creating, they are actually stored in Azure AD. So even though you're saying to me, I only have bought Office 365, so even though you say to me, I've just bought Office 365, I'm going to say to you, you cannot have Office 365 on your own without you having the Azure subscription. It's automatically created for you. Whether you want to go and also have an Azure subscription, which a lot of organizations will do, whether you want to go and again, if I'm talking creating those virtual machines, if I'm talking if I'm talking my infrastructure as a service, that would be done via Microsoft Azure. Again, I'm just going to show you if I do go down, and I'm just going to show you just to prove to you, because again, people don't always believe me when I come along and say, if I go through and create a user here in my Office 365 account, and let's just say I go now create a user, and I'm going to select New Redeem. And I'm just going to go through and select that. And I'm just going to go and select. And I'm going to come along and give you do my own password. Just to show you, Again, there's my. Remember, if you don't allocate a license to the user, the user will be able to log on, but he's not going to have access to any of the Office, any of these applications. He will not see, if he logs on, he will not see that he's got Word, or that he's got Excel, or that he's got OneDrive, or that he's got Teams. He has to have a license. He has to have a location allocated to him, because again, without that location, he will not be able to log on. He will not be able to access the resources. I'm not going to give them a license. Again, what role do I want to give the user? Again, we're not yet. I just want to go through, and I'm just going to go through and do that just to show you the link between. Yes. Yeah. And if I go and search for, there's my user. Now I'm going to just, as I said, because people don't believe me when I come along and I say if I go along the dependency between Office 365 and Azure, when I come along and look at my Azure portal, and I go along and I look at, let's just say I go and I look at the users. And let's say I go and search for, there you are. If I create the user on this side, if I create the user within Active Directory, and let's say I go and create the user, and this time I'm going to choose some Piwe. Oh, some Piwe. And then we'll go and I'll just, it doesn't matter about the auto generate. I'll just like to do that. There we, thank you very much. There's some Piwe. Guess what, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to hop across back here to my Office 365. And I'm going to come back here to my users. And I'm going to go and look at my, no, I didn't want to create a new user. Yes. And I'm just going to go and search for some Piwe. There's some Piwe. So let's not forget that even though we've just gone with Office 365, there's always going to be that dependency to make sure that the where our users and groups are stored, that is supported by Office, by an Azure connection, an Azure Active Directory. So yes, Azure Active Directory is there, it's automatically created. And by the way, you may, as I say, I would hope that for most companies, and I'm sure this is the correct, if I come back, let me just come back here let me just move this out the way. Let me just come back here to my Azure Active Directory. Of course, I may or may not have a full-blown Azure subscription. So if I go and if I searched for subscriptions, if I, let me just type this here, subscription. Am I spelling it correctly? Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do a quick, I'm just going to take you to the full Azure portal just so that you can see. HTTPS portal azure.com. Just to show you. And again, it'll log me in. And you can see my subscription that I allocated to this, to my Office 365. I've got a full-blown Azure subscription, which means that I can go through and create all of these platform as a service. There's my function, there's my or database as a service, or a virtual machine. But I just wanted you to make sure that you understood Office 365 is linked to Azure AD. So there we, as you said, there's my, thank you very much. There's my Office 365. Pay as you go. As I said, do I want to, what offering do I want to go for? Do I want to go for? And we've seen, I showed you my licenses. Hopefully I showed you my licenses when we came along here. And again, depending on your requirements, you will decide. And I often get asked the question, does that mean to say that if I buy an Office E365, Office 365 E5 license, that everybody has to have a 365 license? No. I've got clients where they've got a whole combination of different Office 365 because you're paying money for each of those licenses. Because you're paying money, and again, let me just hopefully get the Office. Sorry, let me just go back here. Office 365. Let's just see if I'm gonna get. Let me just see if this one's going to give me the one with the prices that I wanted to show you. Oh, come on, give me the. I'm just going to do this. E5 versus E3. We'll just go. So as an organization, you will decide. Because there we can see the Office 365 E5 license is going to cost us 641 Rand per month per user. The E3 is going to cost us 366 Rand per month per user. I always have a saying that says you get what you pay for. But if we look at all of the functionality that we're getting with all of these options, you might say to me, not everybody need, and as we scroll down, you can see the difference here. Again, Office 365 E5 includes the meetings, in other words, the Teams and everything. The E3 license doesn't, the E1 doesn't. So that's why I say you will decide based on your requirements which of those licenses you want to go for. That's why when you look at mine, you can see there is a combination of different licenses. So the user who doesn't need the full functionality or doesn't need the enterprise mobility and security license option, you don't buy that for them because maybe you only need one or two administrators who would need that particular license. The others don't need the license. Thank you very much. I'm not going to go and buy all of those. So again, choose choose the license or combination of licenses that meet your particular requirements. Again, when we look at this, yeah. Yeah, there are other alternates. Yes, we know that there's the Amazon Web Services, there's Google Cloud. Again, based on your requirements, what is it that you are needing to get out of a system will dictate what kind of license, what kind of subscription that you are going to go through for your organization. Any questions that you might have on that? On what is the cloud? Any questions? Are we good? Are we good? Are we good?
No questions, ma'am. We are good to go on the next topic.
You are still good to go. I tell you what, we're just going to have a quick little 5-minute a comfort break. It's 12:10. We're just, as I say, just going to have a 5-minute break, and then I'll see you back at 12:15. I say just a 5 minutes or so, just to stretch the legs, just as I say, just to have that a quick bathroom break. So I'm just going to do. Okay, I'll leave I'll keep the recording going. But as I say, I'll see you back in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm back, ladies. I'm back, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, please can you mute? Can you mute your sound? Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so moving on to our next topic, which is move to a modern desktop. And we're going to have a look and see what those requirements are. Move to what do we need? What do we mean when we say move to a modern desktop? I think was one of the other topics that we had to chat about. Again, I asked the question, do we need to worry? Do we need to be concerned when it comes to talking about our desktop environment? Do we need to be worried? Do we care? Do we care about that? Sorry, I don't think I've got my screen shared. Have you? Sorry. I don't think I've shared my screen. Let me just share my screen quickly. Sorry. Apologies for that. Okay, otherwise I would be talking and nobody would be seeing what I was doing. So again, when we say, what do we need if we're wanting to move move to a modern desktop with 365? Again, always the question is, what are the requirements that we're going to need as far as our Windows 10 is going to go? How do we go about updating? What do we need to make sure that our systems will always be updated? So we want to look at and say, what are the choices that we have when it also comes to the management of those systems? What tools do we need to have that we need to be looking at when it comes to doing those updates? So one of the things that we want to look at is, sorry, let me just get my pen over here. Again, the things that we want to look at is, what is my hardware and application compatibility? So again, we're wanting to say, sorry, let me just write this down. What is my hardware and application compatibility? That's one of the first questions that we want to be able to ask ourselves. And again, because we know that you need to meet minimum requirements. So we want to make sure. So Microsoft, again, they will give us the different tools that will help us. They will give us their upgrade readiness tool, the Windows upgrade readiness tool. So I'm just going to write that, the upgrade readiness tool. And again, it will go through and make sure that we've that everything is okay, that we can go through and do that upgrade. They will also give us the readiness toolkit for Office add-ins and VBA. Again, the tool can scan for any VBA macros that you might have in Word and Excel and stuff like that. Again, that might be causing an issue. They've also obviously got the desktop app Assure, desktop app Assure, that you could be using. Again, address any issues that you may have running Windows 10 and any of your Office 365 issues. Again, because that's just the world we live in, that there might be issues that we might have to live with. So again, if we have a look, how are we going to deploy? Sorry, I want to just get the right. Sorry, let me just go and get the right. Sorry, let me just two ticks. Again, we decide what are my deployment options? How do you deploy? Just give me a quick, what are the deployment, anybody want to add the deployment options? How do we deploy, how can I deploy Windows 10? Anybody want to jump in and add and say, how are we going to deploy Windows 10?
Ma'am, could you not perhaps having that you can download Windows 10's operating system, or have it shared on a shared cloud that's accessed by all users and servers, all users on the same server?
Okay, so you're saying, okay, thanks for that. You're quite right. So I can download the software. I can download the software and I can put it on I can put it in a shared location, and I can get my users to come and access that. What's the problem with this option? Is there a problem? Is there do we have an issue with this method that we're looking at, the download and then share it?
The one issue could be
Yes.
if your device is not compatible. But
Okay.
the advantage could be that you have remote access to the Windows 10 operating system.
Okay, so it can be, and
I also think, sorry,
yes,
Ellie.
go ahead.
I also think that another major issue could be in terms of upgrade. So if there's a situation like that, users would have to repeat the entire process again.
Okay, so and you're right. These are the problems that we have. If we're going to have to go and download and do that, it's a manual process. It can be, it can take us a lot longer to download or to distribute and do those updates. But that is an option. So we can also the deployment options that we might want to go for is to go with a subscription option. So again, what that subscription option would do, again, based on your license. So for example, if your subscription, if you've gone and installed the license, and I'm just going to say here, and let's say you've installed Windows 10, and you've installed the Pro version. Remember, it's based on a license code. So again, if you want to go through you change the license code, you said once you've changed that license code, you were sitting on Windows 10 Pro, and after you've updated and entered your new code, you would be sitting with Windows 10 Enterprise. So again, when you sign in and sign in with your new credentials, so again, whether that's, again, remember, based on my license, based on, let me just come back here. Again, you sign in with that license, with that code that you got from the Windows 10 Enterprise. You're going to end up with that license. So that's what we're talking about when I say subscription activation is one way that you could upgrade your. Oops, didn't want to go there. I wanted to go over there. That's what we're talking is a subscription activation that you could go through and do upgrade. How are you going to deploy, again, how are you going to be deploying your application? So Windows itself can have those options. Subscription activation, download the software. I think there was there anyone? Again, you might want to do it using what they call the dynamic provisioning option. Again, where you might want to create a package. Again, using tools like the Windows Configuration Designer. So again, you could be using, and I'm just going to write here, we could be using Windows Config Designer to come along and create a package and then deploy. So again, I could put it to a USB. I could I could put it over. I could put it on a network drive. So again, from a Windows point of view, there are going to be options that we can use. The question is, what do we do with regards to how do we deploy Office 365? So we've looked at Windows 10, but now we want to say, how are we going to deploy? What are my choices for deploying Office 365 to my users? Again, depending on what my configuration might be that I have within my organization, I could be using the configuration manager. Again, it used to be called the configuration manager. They used to call it systems. So you might have heard people speaking about, or you've seen SCCM, System Center Configuration Manager. Again, that will allow you not just to deploy Windows, as I said earlier on, using the Windows configuration, but also to deploy your applications. You can also, if you don't want to, and again, that's a whole beast. I always call it, that's a whole beast. That's a whole service all on its own, that large companies want to use to control the deployment, to control the updates out to their users. If I don't want to have the full-blown configuration tool, but again, I still want to manage the deployment. Again, I could use option 2, says you can come along and use the Office deployment tool. I could come along and use that Office deployment tool. Again, that will allow, again, it's a standalone tool, again, that if I wanted to, I can use it as it on its own, or I can link it with other software deployment tools that are out there, other third-party tools. I could use Microsoft Intune, and I will go through and show you that in a minute. I could use Microsoft Intune to roll out those updates to and deploy those applications to my users. As I said, I'm going to go and show you that in a minute, just like I'm going to show you deploying it from the Office 365 portal. Again, people say to me, which one is the best tool, the best way to deploy these tools? And I'm going to say, you know what, it's always going to come back to what is the amount of administrative overhead? How much do you want to allow your users to be able to do for themselves? So the least amount, so if you said to me, if we looked at these tools, if we looked at these 4 tools, and then I come along and I say to you, if you're looking at those tools, and let's see, who am I going to ask? Who am I going to ask? Should I ask, let's see if Josephine is. Josephine, which of those 4 tools would you say contains the least amount of admin overhead? So which is the least? So the question in the exam comes along and they say to you, which is of these 4 tools, which is the least amount of administrative setup? Which of those 4 would you go for? Let's see if Josephine is there. I do like to involve Josephine. If Josephine doesn't know, anybody else? Omotara? Aaron? Leboha? Anybody else?
I think the portal should be the one with the administrative.
Okay, and you're right. That is the least. But what is the problem with that option? We're saying that that's the least admin overhead. And what's the problem with that? Least admin, but on the same side? Umatara, what would you add to that?
Say you probably wouldn't have enough liberty to tailor it to your needs.
So, and thank you for that. That is exactly it. So it gives, we've got it's the least admin overhead, but it also gives us the least amount of control. But that's what life is all about. It's about balancing and saying, do I want to have the most control, which is obviously the most control we're going to have would be if I was using the configuration manager. But then my users, they've got very little say. To the deployment toolkit, to the Intune, to the Office 365, again, each one of those giving me potentially less admin interaction or less admin control, but then I can't control what the users have access to. So we, again, will decide, and people say to me, so which one must I go for? And I'm saying, but I can't say that you must always go configuration manager, because maybe you don't have that configuration tool available in the organization. Or should I use the Office 365 portal? Again, let's go and have a look and see what that Office 365 portal said to me. And hopefully it's still there. Hopefully it's still, let's just go to my home portal. Let's just go to this. And again, here we can see, here's my option to deploy. As a user, I come along and I can see, I can install Office 365. I can install the Office from here. Because remember, the very first, one of the options we said was put it on a shared drive. Yet my users are still going to have to come along and deploy that. But now I can come along and say, are you allowed to deploy? Now this is me. This is the user. This is the installing directly from the 365 portal. I can come and see over here, and I can launch that, and we can see, and it says, well, what do you want to do? I want to go and install Office. You can install, and it says we can install it onto 5 different devices. Again, if I go and say I want to install Office, no, this is me. Or I didn't want that to do. Let me just, again, this is what I was saying. What flexibility are you going to be giving your users? Because now the user, potentially he could say, I want to install the 64-bit version, I want to install the 32-bit version, or I want to install, again, did I make that Skype for Business? Did I make that available? This is what we are saying when we say this is the control you're giving. This is the control that where you can't say to the user, unless you go and say, I'm not making the 64-bit version available and you will only install the 32-bit. This is your users, thank you, going in and installing these things for themselves. If you've given them the option to be able, if you've given them and said you're allowed to control, and they have a license to be able to do that. This is the least control, but as I say, you don't have that control over the deployment. What you do have control over, because now remember the other thing when we look at this, the other issue is, how do they get their Because the other issue that we have to consider with both, by the way, the deployment of Windows 10 and Office 365, the other issue that you're looking at is how do they get their updates? Because remember, that's the other question that you need to be able to answer. Because, by the way, in case we hadn't realized, whether it's Windows updates, and I'm also going to say Office updates. I'm going to go with both of those options. Because in case we didn't realize it, Microsoft and Azure, we've all moved away from specific service packs and service updates because they're now offering us Windows. It's now just like we had infrastructure as a service, just like we had platform as a service, software as a service. Our Windows updates are now rolled out as Windows as a service. Meaning we're going to be getting those updates. In other words, as I said, we're no longer going to have those service packs. By the way, according to Microsoft, Windows 10, that's going to be it. We're not going to, like we had before, Windows XP, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 8.1, and now Windows 10. If we are to believe what they're telling us, this is the Windows 10 that we get now should be the final version, because now they're going to be relying on those quality updates. And those quality updates, they will include any security updates. They will include any fixes. So the equivalent of what we had before with service packs and all of those that we had to run and download and update. And typically these were issued on a monthly basis. We've also got the other option. Let me just extend my page here. We had our quality updates, and we also have the feature updates. And again, when we talk about those feature updates, they're not as often. Whereas this was on a monthly updates. Feature updates typically might come on a monthly basis. They could come more often. You know, sometimes you see your office saying, "I'm updating, I'm downloading new features." So again, those feature updates, the functionality that we're looking for, we can decide how we want to update that. Because the other thing that we're using to control that, again, would be our servicing channels. Servicing channels. Again, where we can control that. Now you're probably thinking, oh, where do we go and where do we set these updates? Well, if I come along here to my, again, let me just come back here to my Office 365 portal. Let me just come down here to my admin. And when that opens up, I can come along here to my settings. I can go to, for example, organization settings. And just to show you, if you've not looked at, again, what are the things that we want to make available, or how we're going to, but I don't want to do this at this point in time. I want to come along here to my, and I always choose the wrong one, where I can go through and set under my release preferences. I can go through and set that. That's what I can control. I can come along and say, I want the standard release for everybody. So in other words, your entire organization will get those updates when they're available. Are they going to be, do I rather want to go a targeted release? So in other words, those targeted, again, available for everyone, or am I going to go for the selected? And again, let me just, and then it will say, hang on, you've said targeted release for selected users. Again, they will say, which users do you want to roll this out to? That's what we were saying earlier on. I can control, I can choose how I want those, I want you to get those updates. If I want to control, again, how the Office apps and how you get those features, again, I can come along and look at my, okay, I can say, how do I want you to get? So as I said, so if I decide that I'm going to, remember I said earlier on, I want to deploy you and allow you to I've got no, sorry, ladies. Let me just grab a sip of water here quickly. Otherwise, my head and my, I said, the Office 365 portal doesn't give me, there's the least amount of admin overhead, but I've got less control over the deployment. But as I said, what I do have is the control over how they get those feature updates. Now, this is where you can control how they get those updates. Again, as soon as they're ready, then I'm going to make it available. Do I want to do it as a, again, is it going to be a once a month option that's going to be available? Do I'm going to do it as a every 6 months? And again, you and the organization might decide, you know what, every 6 months available for customers. That's typically where you want to make sure that you test all of those things before they get rolled out. Again, yes, go ahead, ask a question.
I wanted to ask if I can use like a random example. If you had a school that has a office that has a computer room with 20 computers in the lab, it would be more likely that they would need regular updates in comparison to a shop owner who only has 2 monitors in the store, being at the front and the back. Just to also for me just to put it into content, would that be a way of you selecting which type of um, uh, deployment technique to use in
Yes.
comparison to the configuration manager and the 365 portal?
Yes, yes. So again, you might decide, as I say, maybe you don't want to use the portal because again, because remember your example was from a school. So
Right.
okay, so maybe the school, you say, I don't want to leave that up to the students or whatever to do that deployment. Then, and I'm just going to come back. Then I wouldn't choose. Then you wouldn't choose the Office 365 portal because you may not want them messing about. You may not want to allow them to be able to deploy those applications because you would rather have them meet specific requirements, which is where you might decide that you'd rather use the Intune portal.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yes, it makes sense, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Okay. So always you look at it and say, what is the best based on the scenario, based on the skill set of the users involved, which of the tools would be best suited that I would recommend. If you want to have more control, I would then go the Intune option. But while I'm here and I'm at this, again, I can control. Remember I said, do I want to control? Look at what I get here. Choose whether your users can install Office apps on their own devices. And again, I can then come along and say, hey, remember I showed you earlier on my option to install Office, the option to install Skype for Business. Maybe I'll say, okay, I'll leave. I just want to be able to demo that. Again, even if I'm going to allow you to install and have, if you've got Mac systems. Maybe you do, maybe you don't have. If you want to make sure that they are never going to install on a Mac system, again, you can come along and deselect that option. But let me come back here to let me just see if this one is going to work where I untick the Skype for Business option. I come along and I save that. Okay, so the feature updates. By the way, the quality updates, I want to make sure that those go through, because those are typically the security where it potentially could affect the security of our system. You know, where they've got those little bugs and those we need to have them fixed. As somebody once said, a bug on a system is just an undocumented feature. But we don't, because potentially if we don't repair, if we don't block that bug, if we don't fix that bug, that potentially could be the weakness that somebody could exploit, that vulnerability, and gain access into our system. And then who knows what they're going to do. So quality updates, we should never be stopping those quality updates from happening. It's the feature updates. That's why I often get asked, why do I only control feature updates and not the quality updates? It's because the quality updates are those security issues that we need to make sure that are deployed as soon as possible. The feature updates, the little extra things that I don't need to really. If I don't want to I can say I don't need those available every 6 months. But now that I've saved that, hopefully, if I'm just going to close you off and I'm going to come back to my account and I'm just going to do a quick, let me just do an F5. I might need to log out and come back in again. Let's just go and view our apps and devices. And look at what it says. Your admin has turned off that Skype installs. Contact your administrator for more information about how to get it. So thank you very much. By one little click, literally the one click of my button, and oh, come on, sorry. Literally by one click of the button, I was able to give you access to the service. If I come and I continue just looking over here, and let's just say I want to go and have a look at, right, let me just see if I want to just do anything else here. This is just controlling how, again, maybe I want to turn off Teams. I'm not quite sure why you would want to turn off Teams, but again, you can say, if again, I can turn that on or off. let me just come back. Sorry, I want to just close this guy off. I'm just going to come back here to my okay, and I want to come back here to my just to see under services. Again, this is where I could set my password policies. Depending on what you want me to talk about. Do I want to set the protection? I can go and have it. I don't think I'm going to have time to cover that today, but if we have time, I'll come back. Yes, we've got that. Okay, I had activated that. Okay, but that's fine. But I just wanted to make sure that we have an understanding of how we can control, again, say just to control that. What, again, there was my, just with the tick box, what I was going to allow you to be able to deploy. Now, in case, I want to just come back here to my users. And I want to just show you, because remember we said you need a license to be able to log on, to be able to go along and deploy anything. I want to just come and have a look at, and I'll choose Dear Old Abby, and I want to just go and have a look at licenses. Again, when I deploy the license to my user, I can just give them the whole of Office 365. Simply by ticking on the box that says, I'm going to give you access to the Office 365, the E5 license. And then I can come along and say, you know what? If I want to now have further control over what applications I want to have you access, I can again come along here and say, these are the options that I want to make and give and have them available to you. If I just say, I'm not going to give you any of that, again, all we're looking at now are with regards to the enterprise mobility. Remember I said you pay for the licenses? This is where we can see. Again, but what I wanted to say was, if I give you the Office 365, give you the tick box, I can control which apps I still want to give you access to. And as you can see, so if I didn't want, so even though I gave you an Office 365 license, I can still come along and say, I don't want to give Abby Skinner access to Teams. Remember, if I'm doing it this way, this requires more admin control. And dear old Abby, shame. She will not have access at all. Are there any questions so far? Are there any other questions that you would like to ask me before I go and show you the Intune options? In your studies, was there anything else that you want me to cover? Otherwise, I'm going to go and show you how Intune works and how we can control access to our resources. Any questions from anybody? Nothing in particular? Going? All good? We all good? Thank you. Thank you. We all good. I don't want anybody losing sleep over anything. As they say, speak now or forever hold your peace. Now, if I want to control, because the option said I can control you from Intune, and Intune is actually controlled from Endpoint Manager. And if I go along to my Endpoint Manager, and we have a look, and we can see what are the options that we have available to us. Again, I can go through, and here I can see if I go along to my devices, we can see at the, I should have 2 devices. I should have 2. And we can see, yes, I've got two clients, a CL1 and a CL2, and it says the one is compliant, the other guy we haven't evaluated yet. Now, when you've enrolled your devices, again, in order for me to be able to control you through Intune, that device has to be enrolled into Intune. Because without enrolling the device into Intune, I'm not going to be able to manage you. Otherwise, this third option that we had here, oops, sorry, this third option that we had over here, where the managing you through Intune, that option, if you've not enrolled your devices into, then I won't be able to control you. So we have to set that up to allow you to be to be controlled. And by the way, just while I'm here, while I see that, by the way, again, I can control even from here how you're going to get those updates. Again, I can come along and control. I can go through and create a profile. And so just while I can come along and say I'm going to set it up as demo 1. Again, which feature update do I want to deploy? Again, depending on which version we have, if I click on the drop down. So again, you would know which version of Windows 10 your users are using. But let's say that I want to go. Let's say I go for along with we currently have 21.21H1. Again, who do I want to include? Which groups do I want to include? Which groups do I want to exclude from this process? So again, if I go through and say, I'm going to go and add groups. And let's say that I'm just going to roll it out to the IT department. And thank you. So this is me controlling things with Intune. Again, even those quality updates. Again, you can go and create a profile. The only dedicated quality is ability to expedite quality. So they're just telling us what they can say. Again, a number of days to wait before a restart. So again, you've deployed an update, and then sometimes you get that bottom right-hand corner, you get that little icon that says Windows updates you need to restart your machine. Again, you can say, do you want to force? You're going to force it immediately, or are you going to say, I'm going to leave it for? You can restart your machine 1 or 2 days, but they're not allowing you at this stage to go more than 2 days. Again, expedite the installation if the device version is less than, and again, they will give us. Because again, they don't want us falling too far behind. We should never allow systems to fall that far behind. But this is, thank you, and I say again, this is us controlling through Intune. And we'll just do again, we'll just say, we'll just give you a demo. We'll do it for, I'll be generous. Good practice is to enable the quality updates to managed something enable to devices. Thank you very much. Let's go next. Again, who do I want to include? Who do I want to exclude? Again, I can go through and say, I'm going to deploy it. You know, I'm just going to deploy it to IT. Normally, you would have a group that would have everybody, and maybe if there was a group called everybody and you then wanted to exclude, you could go and say, these are the groups that I want to exclude. So everybody except, and then you would go through and specify who's on the except list. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. There we go. Now, I was saying that we need to set, and we need to, if we want to control you here through Intune, you need to have your devices that need to be enrolled. And in order to go through the enrollment, so that when you do come along here and you look at monitor, let me just come that. Those devices, how did they get in there? Well, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? There are enrollment policies that you can go through. Okay, now you can control. Again, do we want to configure automatic enrollment so that when I register or join my device to Active Directory, what's going to happen? Again, I can set that scope. Do I want it for the MDM for mobile device management? Do I want to also configure it for application management? Notice that and they don't have to both. So do I want to control you devices and applications? Do I want to control you just the devices, like I'm my demo here? Again, who do I want to allow to be able to enroll those devices? I would come and say, well, maybe I want to only allow, again, these are the people that I want to be able to, because again, maybe it's a pilot phase. It's a proof of concept that you want to go through and set. That you want to then specify to just as does this work? Does this thing work? Does it? No. Yes, we want to go for it. No, we don't want to go for it. That's what we're talking about here. So again, I'll just say we're going to allow everybody to be able to enroll their devices. At this point in time, I don't want to do, again, notice if I just manage the applications, mobile application management, and I'm just going to say none. And then you'll see it will come up and say save, or I can discard, because again, because mine was already set for all. If we go through and say, using the autopilot deployment program, again, you can control. Again, we're not going to, I don't think we're going to have time to do that. But again, I can come along and just say, let's just go back to enroll. I can, again, for Windows devices, if you've got your iPhones or Apple devices, again, I can control you Again, specify what it is that we want. Again, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, I think you've got me next week for exam prep. Am I right? You are the group that I'm doing exam prep with next week. Yes.
Yes, ma'am, you're right.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Hey, you got the short straw. You got me again next week, eh?
Yes.
But you know, again, and next week when we come to doing, I'm going to go through and I'm going to say, you know what, when you come to doing the exam, they're going to say, what are the, know what the screens look like, is what I'm going to say, because they will say, what are the prerequisites that you would need. But I'm not going to do, I'm not going to set that. And maybe you want to go and say, you know what, I want to make sure that I'm only controlling Windows devices, that I'm not going to allow any Apple devices. Well, if that's the case, you want to then say, what are the enrollment restrictions? And again, when we see what are the enrollment restrictions, if I just go through and create a restriction, and if I look at the type, we'll just run through that. Let's just say a device. And this is where we can go through and I can say, do I want to allow you? No, I don't. No, I don't want you if you're coming along with your Apple. No, your iPhones. Do I want to allow? No, I don't want to allow that. Do I want to allow Android? Yes, yes, yes. Again, I can say, are you allowed if it's a personally owned device? So in other words, you're bringing your own laptop, you're bringing your own device into the organization. Am I going to allow you to bring your own personal device? I can go through and say, no, you know what? Personally owned, personally owned, not. Am I going to allow you to? No, but maybe I'll allow you to bring use your own phone. If I wanted to, I can even go through and specify a device manufacturer. So again, I might say that only if you have a Samsung Galaxy or just a Samsung. But I'm not gonna be that specific that I want to go through and set. I'm just going to go through and just to show you again. We can go through and set that. Again, what is the where is the scope? We can go through and set. Again, I don't have, so again, I'm just going to go with the default scope, which it's got. It'll say you've already got that default. If I wanted to go and add, let's just, yes.
What do they mean by the scope tags? What in particular, could you provide like an example of what it would be? I saw it also in the notes, but I wasn't too sure what they meant by specific scope tags.
Okay, so let's go and have a look and see what the default one. Let's just let me just see. I wanted to see if they were going to just show me. Let me just go through and no, they have not gone. Let me just go and get this. Let me just go and get this for you and I'll give it to you. Oopsie. Let me just get this here for you. Okay, so let's say that you've got, and I'm just going to get this document here for you. And I haven't. Okay, let me just drag it. And I will just put this link. So I'm just going to drag this down, and I will put this. I'll put this link. This is what we. So if you weren't sure what the scope tag is, again. And so we can use a scope tag specifically when we're looking at things like our role-based access control, where we're going to say this is who it's going to be applied to. So if you don't want it to apply to everybody, you can go through and create scopes. So you can say this is for this will be for our administrators. This will be for our developers. This will be, so you can go through and create those different scopes. And when you come along here and you now want to go through and set and say, who do we want this deployed to? So let's just go back here. So that here, when you were saying, this is who we wanted to apply to, that you can then go through and say it applies to these groups or to this user or to these roles, that you can go through and set that on.
Oh, I see. So, like with the example with the school, if you had tags for students, teachers, administrators, and so forth,
Yes, yes. That's typically where tags come. So you can, as you say, so it's teachers, students, managers, all different departments that you might want to go through. And so then you can go through and use that scope tag.
Thank you, ma'am.
Pleasure. As I say, if you want, I can make this document available if you want to. If you want me to put that up there for everybody. Yes, you want it? Do you want it? You want
Yes,
it?
ma'am.
Yeah. Okay.
It will be great.
Okay. I will make sure that you get those documents. So at the moment, Shane, we've only got the one default. Yeah, only that one's tag. So we would have to create those scopes first, and then we could utilize them here. So let's go through again. Who do we want to, which groups do we want to, or any where we want to create those restrictions? And thank you very much. I'm just going to do that. And we can go through and set that. So now we've gone through, and you can see here now again, there is my device restriction. So again, if we go through, and let's just see, I don't think there was anything else. So again, this is, it's about the control that you want to have over your users. It's about saying, what are we going to allow you? What are we not going to allow you to be able to do? Now, you can also come along, now that we've set up, now you say to me, how do I actually enroll that device? Well, for the enrollment process to take place, again, will depend on where you are, whether you want to use your group policies, whether you're going to allow the users with their mobile devices. But for example, if I wanted to enroll, and let's say that I'm just going to come along here to, I'm not going to do the whole thing, but just to show you where your users, if you're not going to do it automatically, how your users can enroll their devices into Intune. You would come along here, accounts. before I do that, let me just go back to my Azure AD. And again, I can just show you from the Azure AD side, because everyone always forgets that Azure AD is involved. Again, I can just show you from this side. And device settings. Notice here on the screen, it's saying how will the device be controlled. So again, once my device is joined, again we can see who we're controlling it from, or who is controlling it. So again, if I come along here to my device settings, and this is where again users may join their devices to AD. And again, you see I've allowed everybody to be able to join. So again, I always just like to go and show you the Azure AD side, because again we forget. So I've allowing you here again. Come and look at my settings, and as I said, we can see it says I'm either an Azure AD joined device or I'm a hybrid joined device. In other words, if I say that you're a hybrid joined device, that means, quick question, what does a hybrid joined device mean? If I say you're a hybrid joined device, quick question. Because it was, when we looked here, it said you can either be an Azure AD joined device. The choices were Azure AD joined, and that was option 1, and that was option 2. Who's brave? Who's going to give me the explanation? Hello? Anybody? You don't know? You don't know? So would you like to know what is the difference between those two? You want to know? Give me a thumbs up. Give me a yes, you want to know, or you don't want to know. I always just like to.
Ma'am, Lebohang says a hybrid is available on and off premises.
Is that what is? Did I not see? Did I not see his message? Did I not see his? Sorry, let me just go and see. Available on and off. Available on and off. Okay. What do we mean available on and off premises? Okay, I know Archibald. What do we mean when you? What do you mean when you say it's available? It's visible in on premise. Where on premise am I looking? I know I'm pushing I'm pushing the limits here now. And you're right when you say it's visible in both on premise and Azure. Thank you. That's what I want to make sure that we're not just saying on premise for the sake of saying on premise. When you say it's available as on premise, in other words, my two options are to be you belong to You belong to the Active Directory domain environment. Sorry, let me just Active Directory. You belong to Active Directory. Be better if I just said that. You belong to Active Directory. And you've decided that you're going to be joining Azure AD. So yes, Lebogang, so I just wanted to make sure that when we're saying on premise, that everybody has an understanding of when you're saying on premise. That's what we are talking about. It's the Active Directory, and it's otherwise, if not everybody might have had that understanding of when you were saying on premise. If I say that you just Azure AD, that means that you are coming in, that you are just, you don't belong to the domain, but you want to join, obviously, Azure AD. So the hybrid joint device, for this hybrid joint device to work and to be able to join, that means that you would be using a tool called AD Connect. And AD Connect would then allow us, and we would go through and set it up, and it would allow us to be able to specify whether I want to allow any computer account that's joined to Active Directory on premise, whether I'm going to allow you to be able to be joined to the cloud. And AD Connect, I'm just going to come and extend my page even more. AD Connect is the tool you would use to sync your users from AD, which is on-prem. You want to synchronize those user accounts up to the cloud, because you don't want to have to sit and recreate all of your user accounts over and over and over again. You would use that tool that will allow you to synchronize users, but not only synchronize users, but also to specify whether you're going to allow computer accounts to be controlled. And when I say computer accounts to be controlled, in other words, controlled through Intune. So that hybrid joint device, Active Directory, you belong to both Active Directory and Azure, or are we just going to be an Azure AD joined? Now, that Azure AD joined, if you don't know how they would do that, as I said, you'd go to your settings. I'm already there under my settings. You would go to Access Work or School. And this is where you would then go through and set them up. Let's see if mine will allow me to set up. And this is where it says, join this device to, and then it will say, which account are you wanting to use? And I'll sign in as admin at, let me just get my whole, at M365. 6290.onmicrosoft.com, if I've done it correctly. What is my password? This is the process that if you've never done a straight Azure AD join, then this is the process that would be happening. Make sure this is your organization connecting, blah, 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 blah. Thank you. Yes, 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 yes. Of course I trust you. And now that I'm doing this, I should have done this when we started because it can take quite a while to come through. Please wait while we're setting up your device. Very polite. Your device is connected to. And again, if I come along and have a look, as I said, this process to see it popping up here under my and show me as an Azure AD joint device, it's going. Oh, actually, it was quicker than it. Again, notice. Thank you very much. There, I am a compliant device. And again, you say to me, so what? You're a compliant device. And I say to you, I can use that. Okay, let's just come to Endpoint Manager again. End up opening up so many tabs. We should see 3 of these devices now. This one can take a while. Let's just see. Oh, close you off. Close you off. Otherwise, I've got a million devices. The reason that I say it annoys me when it takes but anyway, it takes as long. And I said one of the things we can do in controlling you, the purpose of the Intune control is that I can set compliance policies. I can go through and control you with conditional access and say, if your device is compliant, you may or may not gain access. Again, I'll just show you compliance policies. And I can I'll just do that. I can go through and say selected apps. I can go through and say let me just do Exchange. And I can use that to, again, control access to our resources. Are there any questions? Because I see we've come up to our 1:30. Ah, there's still so much to show you. Oh, now I'm hiccuping. Ladies and gentlemen, any questions that you have? You may, if you need assistance, if you need clarity, like earlier on with the when we were talking about the scope, you're welcome to drop me an email, and I'll rather just type it out. It is my email address. So you're welcome to drop me an email if in this week of studying and going through things, if you're not quite sure and you want a little bit more clarification. Just like I said, I'll send you that link. You're welcome, as I say, I have got everybody's email address. I can also or I can send it to Eloise and say, please forward this page on to the delegates, to the students. Any questions that you might have?
None at all from my side, ma'am. I think it was a good lesson.
Did you learn something today?
Extensively, ma'am.
No, did anybody fall asleep? Or or you wouldn't know if you'd fallen, you wouldn't know to answer the question because you would have fallen asleep already, hey? I'm just so ladies and gentlemen, as I said, please don't be shy to email me. Or email Eloise, and Eloise can contact me. As I said, I've given you my email address directly. And I believe we meet again next Friday when I go through exam prep. Now, again, if during the week there are specific things you want me to cover next Friday, please just drop me an email and say, Ellie, please will you just talk about this, this, and this? Or will you just make a note to reference? I didn't understand. That's what the purpose of the exam prep is going to be, to help you get through the exam. So it's the more, if you say, I didn't understand this, or I saw this question online, I didn't understand what they were talking about. So again, next week is very much a demos, a hands-on process. As again, like I ended off now with the Intune, I will go through and take you through all of the sections. I'll again show you next week. I'll show you the what's required to write this particular exam, the MS 100 exam. Again, what are the skills required? I want to just double check. I want to just double check and make sure it is the exam prep for MS 100. Again, I will make sure that I get the MS 100 skills requirements, and I will send that through to you all in the week. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed the session with me. As you can see, I didn't bite, eh? Motara, did I bite? I didn't bite, eh? Well, as I said, and as I said, okay. So let me just see the okay. How about yeah? We'll look at the. Oh, you want RDP? Okay, outside the scope, but okay. Let's see. Okay, we just want to just make sure that I haven't missed any of your questions. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, have an awesome weekend. I know there's going to be a lot of studying between now and Friday. And again, the more you study, the more questions you'll be able to ask me next week. Not so? Hey, is it Sipiso? You've learned a lot. That was a pleasure. And so I hope you, more important, you learned a lot, more importantly, that you actually enjoyed the session with me. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a wonderful
Thank
Thank you, ma'am.